Well, guys, this just came out. 3 more cops are now charged in George Floyd's death, and the other officer's murder charge has been upgraded. They're talking about Derek Chauvin, the one who was the primary, suspect there, kneeling on George Floyd's neck. He initially had a third-degree murder charge and I believe a second-degree manslaughter charge filed against him for the murder of George Floyd. Now, what is happening now is the 3 other cops involved. There was the guy standing and 2 more on George Floyd's back and his legs. All of those 3 cops are now getting charged with the death, and then the primary officer, his charge is getting bumped up. So let's look at what that means here. So here's a picture, by the way. There's Derek Chauvin, the main one you all have probably seen, who is getting the upgraded charge. Here are the other 2 officers also on George Floyd, and here's the one you see standing in the video. So 3 former Minneapolis police officers will be criminally charged Wednesday in connection with the death of George Floyd in their custody. In addition, Derek Chauvin, a 4th former officer who had already been charged with third-degree murder in the case, will now be charged with second-degree murder. The ex-cops had assisted Chauvin in arresting Floyd on Memorial Day on the suspicion that Floyd had passed a counterfeit bill. Chauvin, and here's where they throw in race, typical, right? Who is white, was charged on Friday with third-degree murder and second-degree manslaughter after video footage emerged showed him kneeling on Floyd's neck for nearly 9 minutes as Floyd, a black man, lay handcuffed, crying out, and could not breathe. If you haven't seen the video, it's awful, it's terrible. I'm sure most of you know what has happened by now. The video shows that Chauvin continued to keep his knee on Floyd's neck. Okay, so it sparked protests. The family has also demanded that Chauvin face a first-degree murder charge. Now, we'll get into that in a minute, too. Ben Crump, an attorney for the family, said in a statement that the family's reaction was that it was a bittersweet moment with the charges being filed, I guess. A second-degree murder charge carries a statutory maximum sentence of 40 years upon conviction compared to the 25-year for third-degree murder. So on average, he would have been looking at a 25-year sentence for his third-degree murder charge, plus maybe whatever the manslaughter charge was on top of that, I'm not sure. And then 40 years for getting bumped up to second-degree murder. Klobuchar, a former candidate for the Democratic presidential nomination, served years ago as the Hennepin County attorney. The Hennepin County Attorney's Office was handling prosecutions stemming from George Floyd's death until Minnesota Governor Tim Walz assigned Ellison the responsibility Sunday. 2 separate autopsies, one commissioned by Floyd's family and another performed by Hennepin County, Minnesota Medical Examiner's Office, both found that Floyd's death was homicide, but they differed in their determination of its causes. The Hennepin County Medical Examiner's autopsy found that Floyd died from cardiopulmonary arrest that was complicated by the police subduing him with restraint and neck compression. The autopsy cited underlying health conditions. Okay, but then you go over to the independent autopsy that the family paid for, and they found that he died from asphyxiation and that the pressure on his neck and back contributed. One of the pathologists and former chief medical examiner said Monday that Floyd had no underlying medical problems that caused or contributed to his death. So the criminal complaint against Chauvin details Quang's and Lane's actions during Floyd's arrest. According to the complaint, Quang held Floyd's back and Lane held his legs. Okay, so that's the other 2 officers we see at the back. At one point, Quang checked for a pulse and said, "I could not find one," according to the complaint, but he and the other cops stayed in their positions for approximately 2 more minutes after they couldn't find a pulse. Floyd repeatedly told the officers that he could not breathe, cried out for his deceased mother, and asked the officers, please. The complaint against Chauvin reads. So, yep, let's move on. It describes the video encounter we've all seen and what happened. So, yeah. So, the other officers are now getting charged. It doesn't say here what exactly they're getting charged with, just that they're going to be charging these other officers with something. But we're seeing the main guy the main culprit here, who actually had his knee on his neck, his is getting bumped up from third to second. So I thought we'd go over the difference here, because the family was advocating for first-degree murder charge, right? And whatever happens here, we want justice to be done, right? We want the accurate, charges to be applied, and we don't want to go over the top, but we also don't want to do too little. You want to find exactly what's right based on what we have set up. So they're calling for first-degree murder, and a lot of times first-degree murder is characterized by premeditation of some sort. So it could be like one of three things. Here's what this says. It means the murder was willful, deliberate, or premeditated. It had a specific intent to kill, and they have to prove that there is specific intent, and that it was calculated. And same thing with like felony or by specific means. It has to show some form of intent and that it was planned out and calculated, which in this scenario, as far as I can tell, granted they might have more evidence, but I don't know how they could ever get it up to a first-degree murder charge, unless Chauvin had somehow planned, to set George Floyd up and then plan to pin him down on the ground and kill him like that beforehand. Second-degree murder, the one they're now giving him from third-degree murder, does seem like it could fit somewhat. Second-degree murder is characterized as not first-degree murder. It was not premeditated or deliberate. It could even indicate they were willing to cause harm, but were not intent on causing death. A lot of times people call it a crime of passion. So it's intentional murder without premeditation, or an unintentional murder or involuntary manslaughter. And that's what he's at now. And you could see how that would kind of fit if he wasn't intending to kill this guy necessarily at first, but he, abused his power, and there was intent to cause harm by putting his knee down his neck. You could probably argue that. Third-degree murder is only in a few states, because I was having trouble figuring out what third-degree murder was. Turns out it's only defined in Florida, Pennsylvania, and Minnesota. Minnesota just happens to be where he's being charged at. Depending on the state, third-degree murder can be characterized as non-violent felony murder or depraved heart murder, as the second-degree murder is characterized in other states. In Pennsylvania in particular, third-degree murder is characterized by the principle of an accomplice in the perpetration of a felony. Moreover, the Pennsylvania law includes drug delivery resulting in death from a third-degree murder. Third-degree murder can also be defined as negligent homicide and usually includes less serious sentencing options for the defendant. Okay, so we're seeing George Floyd bumped up, and based on what's said there, you could make an argument for second. I don't think you could really make an argument for first-degree murder, and maybe the family's just saying that, because they're torn up and they want the absolute harshest sentence placed on him. But before, people were saying, that third degree, didn't qualify and he needed bumped up to second. It wasn't enough. And I hope, however this plays out, granted, nothing's going to bring George Floyd back, and there's still that heartbreak from that. But I hope that people, find some comfort in the charges that are filed against him, and that it doesn't continue to escalate and say, well, we want first-degree murder, we want the death penalty, if it doesn't line up with what's here. I mean, they got to continue to do the investigation and the trial and everything. As with regards to the charges on the other officers, I am not exactly sure. We will see, I guess, what they decide to do. It could be a form of manslaughter, or maybe that third-degree murder. I still don't fully understand that. But yeah, so action is being taken, and steps are being taken to, hold these officers accountable. This is what people want, right? This is what the protests were about, to not let them off the hook and not let things slide under the radar. You wanted attention brought to it, and you wanted things fixed. I hope people see this, and maybe these riots can die down and the violence can end. Not that it should have been there to begin with, should have just been peaceful protests. But hopefully, this is progress in the right direction, and maybe the cover for these rioters will now go away. We will see. But there you go. we are that much closer to having justice for Floyd. And if that's what, you're out there fighting for, then here you go. It's happening. Let's not make it about something else. We want justice for him, and we want justice for anyone who's wrong like this. And let's hope we can continue to take actions to stop things like this, but also not turn it into crazy, wild destruction of the country. Thank you guys for tuning in for all of today's segments. We'll continue to keep you updated with any relevant news regarding these officers, George Floyd, the riots, the protests, and anything else going on that you need to hear about. Again, it really helps me out if you guys can hit that like button. And also, if you subscribe, you'll be notified when we come out with these on a regular basis, so you'll get the news right then and there. But most of all, if you can, just share this with other people and let them know what's going on, and we can move forward together. Thank you guys. We will see you next time.